Oh, hello there. I didn't see you over there. Why don't you gather around the fire? Let me tell you a story of Star Wars The Old Republic and its missing expansion. It all started many years ago. Star Wars The Old Republic released its first expansion in April of 2013. This was Rise of the Hutt Cartel. It took 1 year and 4 months from the launch of the game for the expansion to be released, not by any means to be the worst time frame to exist. Rise of the Hutt Cartel brought new and fresh content to Star Wars The Old Republic. The players rejoiced when an expansion launched. Their favourite MMO had released more content to fulfill our Star Wars fantasies. The patch notes were bliss to look through. Then 1 year and 7 months later, they did something truly amazing. Shadow of Revan. This expansion released in December 2014, and oh boy did we love it. SWTOR had delivered an expansion to us so satisfying that it consumed most of my life in 3.0. The players once again rejoiced as their favourite MMO was updated with hours upon hours of more content. Operations, gear, discipline paths, the list goes on for Shadow of Revan. Not to mention that the entire expansion was based on a character from Knights of the Old Republic, Revan. A character all the Old Republic Star Wars era fans will know. But after Shadow of Revan, the game changed. Time was slipping away and the countdown to the next expansion was coming close. Knights of the Fallen Empire. Any story player's dream expansion. The MMO itself changed its direction with this expansion. Knights of the Fallen Empire was released 10 months after Shadow of Revan, in October of 2015. This is the shortest amount of time BioWare took in releasing an expansion. BioWare told us they want to focus on story-driven content. One of the knock-on effects this had was the game became much more solo player friendly than it did for multiplayer content. A strange balance of content considering SWTOR is an MMO, however, it has always claimed to be a story-driven MMO. Knights of the Fallen Empire was received very well by Star Wars fans all over the world, while some players felt they were overlooked, mostly because they didn't have any solid updates to the content that they wanted to play. This expansion as a whole came with a lot of story content. In fact, it brought 16 chapters of story, each of which had different difficulties later down the line. Despite its target audience, the expansion was a success, to an extent. Then, 1 year and 2 months later, in December of 2016, Knights of the Eternal Throne was released, the sequel expansion to Knights of the Fallen Empire. The balance of content with this expansion was slightly different than the previous. The focus was still on story, given the fact we were given 9 more chapters to play. BioWare also released Uprisings as a new type of content, basically a shorter version of a Flashpoint. Again, despite the balance in content, the expansion and its updates were a success, but again, only to an extent. So here we are, 4 expansions within 5 years of each other, and I'm wondering where our missing expansion is. But wait, didn't BioWare release another expansion in late October of 2019? Wasn't it called Onslaught? Yes, this is true. An expansion named Onslaught was released. However, it's not what we were used to. Onslaught brought us a small content update for story and 1 new Flashpoint. It also had 1 new operation. Comparing Onslaught to previous expansions is almost laughable. Onslaught would be better described as a normal content update following an expansion. So what happened? Almost 3 years passed since the release of Knights of the Eternal Throne before Onslaught was brought to us. This is the largest content gap they've ever given the players, yet for some reason, the expansion we got in the end was the smallest of all expansions so far. It's hard to say why the developers decided to make this move. You could look at BioWare as a whole and see that the game company has been busy with other projects too, such as Anthem, which released on February 22nd, 2019. It's more than possible that BioWare wasn't able to put a focus on SWTOR during the release of some of the titles that they had in the works. Not that Anthem did well anyways. Now, today is the 23rd of July 2020. SWTOR still hasn't released any plans for a new expansion later this year. The only thing the devs like to tease right now is the 10th anniversary of SWTOR, which does happen in December of this year. Looking back at previous expansions and content patterns, where is our missing expansion? The release dates of Knights of the Fallen Empire and Shadow of Revan being just 10 months between each other is evidence that creating an expansion in that time frame is possible. So we can only ask why we haven't had another one. Or at the very least, a larger content update. Recently, the devs streamed a roadmap of 2020. I covered the details in one of my more recent videos, so feel free to go and check it out. The devs have told us that they have plans to refresh a lot of older content throughout this year. I just hope that this isn't a bad sign that they are not working on another expansion. It's been 7 months since Onslaught released, and it still hasn't had any significant content updates to the expansion. We have been told that there will be a small story update along with a new flashpoint coming in the holidays this year, but this just isn't an expansion. Now, you could argue that it's been almost 4 years since we've had a proper expansion for this game. The way I see it, Knights of the Eternal Throne was the last expansion that we actually received. I would very much like to consider Onslaught an expansion, but with just the amount of content that it has, I just can't. Even with the roadmap that they gave us in regards to a new flashpoint that's coming, even though it's going to be themed on Mandalorians and that's going to be cool. There is also a new Thanksgiving event that's going to be an annual thing that's also coming, but again, this isn't an expansion. And again, it's been almost 4 years since we had a real expansion. So, on behalf of all of the SWTOR players, where is our missing expansion? Onslaught was nowhere near enough to even be considered a solid update. The return to Empire vs Republic territory is sorely wanted, yet what we have been teased still has yet to show itself. This is just the tip of the iceberg and non-existent content. For example, a few years ago, I was able to have an interview with Charles Boyd, the creative director, and Eric Musker, the community manager. In the interview, they spoke of PvP, and how it's not lost on them. There was promise of attention to PvP, but with no real changes to be seen, even years later. Now let's get one thing straight. I love this game. Many people do, and we want to see it updated with content that we enjoy. So dear BioWare, where the hell is our expansion, bruh?
You must realize you are